Hey, what's up? What's up?
Oh, great. Now we got Bob's echo back all of a sudden.
Thanks, Bob.
Way to go, Bob.
There you go. I'll mute myself.
Hey Bob, how you doing?
How's everybody doing tonight?
Oh, I'm doing fine, thank you.
Doing pretty good. Doing really good in life.
It's too bad we don't have anything to talk about this week. It's going to be a real boring one for you guys.
Yep.
Maybe we'll just have a soda war here. Maybe
What do you got
That's all
there?
we can talk
Little Pib
about.
Zero?
no, just a little bit, little pip zero
Nice.
problem.
I'll be
At the
rocking.
Oktoberfest.
Ooh, Oktoberfest. Nice. Sam Adams.
Ooh,
Sam Adams makes good beer, surprisingly, for like a
I just have red,
gigantic brewery.
just red wine for me.
Like a generic bottle that's labeled red wine.
Right.
No,
The
actually,
ghetto store.
it's homemade actually. So
Oh, nice.
Cool.
I will be rocking this refreshing Dr. Pepper. Ignore the label, it says Flying Dog at the top.
I'm drinking Sprite because I'm a real boy with a real body.
Are you also eating Pizza Hut with that Sprite? Because they are like designed to go together like gin and tonic in a way.
I guess, Nick, I like to eat my hot pizza with Sprite.
Well, welcome back, everybody who subjects themselves to this regularly. And hello to the new people. What we normally do is start out with what we've been working on since the last time. So who wants to kick it off?
Don't jump in at once,
Yeah, Jesus,
everybody.
guys, come on.
I'll go first.
oh,
No, go ahead, Renee. Go ahead, Renee. Absolutely.
yeah, I want to talk a bit about, so not necessarily something I've been working on, but something that kind of erupted on Twitter, and I just want to talk about the engineering behind it, right? And that's PCB surface finish. So what I want to explain is what PCB surface finish is in not too great detail, but not one sentence description either, and explain why it's important and what are the pros and cons of every kind of finish there is and whatnot. So I'll first start from 10,000 foot view. This is the structure of a PCB from the middle to copper layer. So you'll have the fiberglass layer, the FR4, followed by the copper layer, which is generally etched into the shape of your circuit. On top of the copper, you'll have something called solder mask, which is the green stuff, which hides any copper that's not going to be soldered. And you also might find a silk screen on there, which is just generally has reference designators printed on it. And finally, the important thing will be the surface finish. So the surface finish is like a thin layer of metal that's added on top of the exposed copper, which kind of has two functions. It protects the underlying copper from oxidation, and it also provides you with a solderable surface for Voultar and Chinese factory workers to work on. So for casual people, it might seem like when you're looking at a board that there's just a few kinds of surface finish. It might look like you have boards that have a silver finish on top, and it might look like some boards have a gold colored finish on top, and it might even look like some boards have a surface finish that you'd argue about on Twitter. But the ones that I'm going to talk about are Hazel, Enig, and hard gold. So I'm going to start with the Hazel finish. Hazel, as we all know, stands for the Handicap Awareness and Support League, and it's generally the cheapest option, and it's also the one that's easiest to solder to, right? So it's going to look like a silver finish. Hazel is not very flat, right? Because it's added on there with hot air, so it's going to have all sorts of not so big bumps, but it's not flat, so you can't use it for stuff like BGA packages. It's also not strong mechanically. You can't rely on Hazel to make good edge connections, and it can be scraped off rather easily. And if you want like proof of that or pictures, if you go to my website, there's a blog post that I show where I took some edge connectors and I subjected them to about 500 mating cycles each, and I compared Hazel and Enig and hard gold. You'll see what I mean by Hazel can be scraped off. Doesn't take that long for the Hazel to just come off and expose the copper on the board. So Hazel or the silver finish is not a good candidate for an edge connection. The next kind of surface finish would be Enig, which is which stands for Engineers Need Immediate Gratification, and it's generally more expensive than Hazel. I am just off the top of my head, when I order PCBs, I generally have to pay like a $15 premium on any number of boards to get an Enig finish. The advantages of Enig is that it's much more corrosion resistant than Hazel because it's plated with gold, and gold is barely reactive with any substance at all. Enig also has excellent surface planarity. So if you're going to do a board that has BGA packages, you're going to want at least Enig because of that flat surface will make the BGA packages much more easier to reflow. Enig, however, is still not strong mechanically and can be scraped off. Not as bad as Hazel in the tests that I've made, but it's still not something that you want for edge connections. So that leaves you with hard gold. Hard gold is definitely more expensive than Enig and much more expensive than Hazel. And I'll say that hard gold also has the disadvantage of not being properly advertised on a lot of PCB manufacturers. Some of them, I think...
Some of them don't even do it.
Yeah. I think Oshpark, right? You can't even get hard gold from them?
Oshpark they streamline everything, so it's Enig on everything to make everything easier for them. So that's
Enig everywhere.
Yeah. So the advantages of hard gold, so it still has some of the same advantages as Enig because it's corrosion resistance because of the gold, except that it's very strong mechanically and also has excellent surface planarity. So Enig is the perfect candidate for edge connections. So if you're going to be making a board like a game cartridge that has like gold fingers on it, which need to interface to a mechanical connector, you definitely want to use hard gold, and nothing of cheaper quality than hard gold because your product is not going to survive many mating cycles if you don't use hard gold.
Well,
that's what she said.
René, everything that you said is absolutely spot on, but I think I just want to add one more thing about hot air surface leveling, or Hazel. Hazel boards, when you get those back from the fab, typically there's a 30-day maximum turnaround time for where you need to actually put solder on these things and do the fabrication. That's because the tin on the Hazel boards, there's no plating or finish, so it's rapidly deteriorating and reacting to the elements. So using that as a mechanical to connect, I'd like to see one of those in just a couple of years to see, or even in 6 months to a year, to see what's left, because that finish in that tin is just going to react and it's going to corrode and erode away.
Is that why on cheaper boards sometimes the pads lift with Hazel pads?
No, that's because of the glue they use to secure the copper to the...
Yeah, like phenolic boards.
Yeah. Right. Sorry.
Yeah, because like René said, you have your substrate, your glass epoxy substrate, and you have the copper on top. To merge the copper onto there's some adhesive that they have. And on cheaper boards, that adhesive comes apart. Like the copper will separate from the epoxy glass substrate, and you can usually smell that when it's happening.
Right, sure can.
So something else to factor in for the pads lifting is that those pads are not designed to survive that many heating cycles too, right? Because of the whatever compound was used to help stick the copper onto to help stick the copper onto the FR4, right? So if you're going to be subjecting it to lots of rework, it's natural that your pad will eventually lift because you're subjecting it through too many heat cycles and it's not rated to do that.
So keep that in mind if you're going to do any modifications. The Sega Master System, for example, if you want to mod and do things to it, it's one of those things where measure twice, cut once is really important because it's a phenolic board, and the vias, it's one layer, and it's like silk screen vias. You'll destroy that in like a couple of passes if you're having to rework something on it.
Yeah.
That's all I want to say.
And there's something else I want to add to this too. Is I talked about when you use Hazel, when you use, well, no, sorry, I talked about the advantages and disadvantages of Hazel, of Enig, and of hard gold, and I also want to talk about when should you fight about this. Okay, well, Hazel and Enig are well known and advertised by PCB fabs. Like I said, hard gold not so much, and we even discussed some PCB houses don't even offer hard gold, right? So
can I mention just one little thing? Sometimes Enig is called immersion gold, and there's also something called immersion silver, which is a little bit cheaper than Enig,
And immersion tin.
and immersion tin as well. So there's other finishes, but Renee's talking about the most popular ones.
yeah.
So sorry, just wanted to put that context into there.
So what I want to jump in is, and I'm going to speak from personal experience here, is that the designer, if you're looking at a board that's not using the proper finish, the designer may not be aware of hard gold's existence, right? Depending on his level of experience, depending on which fab house he's using, depending on where he's worked and what finish they used at that particular company, and that brings in the fact that electronics is a complicated business, right? And I'm going to say, don't assume the designer sucks just because of one mistake. We all make mistakes. It takes me a minimum of 3 to 4 spins just to get a single PCB right, and I guess that's probably a fair number for most designers. It's definitely hard to get something right the first time. So whenever I make a mistake in something, I like to inform the person privately first, to as a courtesy. But then after a few months, if you don't hear back from them, then you can go ahead and write a damning article about flashcards and repros.
Very good point, René. Very good point. It's we all make mistakes. I certainly have made several, and there have been, but it's okay to do that. The key to all of that, and what's most important, is that you stay transparent and you don't engage in sort of revisionist practices. Be open about it. Be honest about it, guys. Whatever happened, this was a problem. Here's what I'm doing to fix it. If you had one of these before, you can contact me. It's done and it's over. There you go. Problem solved.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's not wrong for someone to make a board out of any type of surface finish, depending on what you have planned for this board. All the prototypes I make, I always have them made in Hazel, just because I'm assuming that I'm in that range of 3 to 4 spins of the board, which are not even going to work out as a product anyway. So I don't care if they're Hazel. I'm going to use them 10, 20 times, and then they're going to go out the door. So that's fine for Hazel. It's
Sure.
just right when you're going to start ramping up production, that's when you want to start looking at using the proper finish.
Right.
Was it for AT motherboard computers? Didn't they have memory chips that weren't gold, and then there were like timing errors or something back in the day?
Oh yeah.
So
It's a huge problem.
Yeah, but what was that exactly? What am I trying to think of here?
I'm not aware of that.
Well, you're thinking of DRAM. Yeah, there were a lot of DRAM modules.
Yeah, DRAM modules.
Yeah, SIP packages, right? And they were the contacts were it's probably immersion tin, right?
Yeah.
And you would pop one of those open if the computer was in a humid or in an area that wasn't very well climate controlled. Listen, I did that for 11 years, and they would be these diagnostic machines would be totally destroyed on the inside because of the plating employed on the surface finishes.
Right.
Electroplating.
It's just another example of why it's important to pick the correct plating.
Like Enig is radically more efficient and better than Hazel.
Oh yeah.
Enig but if you had to, if you had to postulate something like, let's say that Enig is Enig to Hazel what S-Video is going between composite, and this is just to kind of break it down for the audience. Is it like going from composite to S-Video and the difference between S-Video and RGB? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like is Hazel the Enig to the hard gold? Is it sort of the same kind of analogy there?
I think you got to be careful because that hard gold is like a super special version where it's like, okay, this is going to interface with mechanical connectors, where the other ones are just solderability.
Right.
So I don't know if you can make such an accurate analogy like that.
Yeah, that's what I don't think you can.
Yeah, in the test, in the unscientific, not double-blind test that I made using my Hazel, Enig, and hard gold boards, I would say that there was a tremendous jump in quality for an edge connector between Hazel and Enig, and then not so much between Enig and Hazel, between Enig and hard gold. Sorry, there was an improvement, but not as much as an improvement between Hazel and Enig.
Right.
Like the Enig wouldn't peel off so easily like the Hazel did.
Well, and the argument that I've heard a couple of people spout was, if it's for something like a multi-out, for example, how many times do you want to cycle that thing? I'll tell you, dude, a lot of these people who want these mods are hardcore speed runners, and they're touring, they're roaming around this country and places all over the world, and they put a shit ton of cycles on their I/O connectors, on anything mechanical. So, that will add up. And just because somebody else doesn't, may only plug in the plug into the AV port 6 or 7 times throughout its life, doesn't mean that the other people who religiously do it, we should forget about them.
That ran out of space, so I keep all of my shit on a shelf, and then just plug 1 or 2 things in at a time. So that means every single time I want to play SNES, I'm going to take it off the shelf and then plug in the AV cable and then plug in the SCART connector. So, and then when I'm done, I unplug it and put it back on the shelf. And I know a lot of people whose setups are like that nowadays.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you're designing a product, you in general try to consider the hardest case scenario.
Right.
You don't assume that that's going to be the average user, but I mean, like me and Steve, one of the things we've been struggling with, as people might be aware, is like sourcing a PlayStation connector. And it's the same thing. We could assume that most people are not going to be inserting and removing the PlayStation connector a bunch of times, so the tightness of the fit for those people doesn't matter. But you do have to consider that there are going to be people out there that will be heavier users, and you don't want them to break their PlayStation because it's too tight of a fit. It's the same thing. Well, you don't want those people to ruin their their plating on their connectors.
I don't think it makes any difference. I mean, if someone can say, well, how many times, the average person is probably only going to cycle that connector 6 or 7 times. It doesn't matter. That's anecdotal as far as I'm concerned, because you don't think about what one person might or might not do. You have to think of these extreme corner cases, right? At least I do.
You don't have to design your thing perfectly for the extreme corner case, but it comes into your mind as you design things. It's something you factor in for sure.
It's something that I always used in my testing, and one of the things that we did is we rented time in a heat chamber. So we put the computers that we designed inside one of these things, and we jacked the temperature up, and we learned a lot. And then when we were going back and making revisions, I took a huge cardboard box, put the computer inside, and then duct taped the box to the table. It actually simulated the same freaking thing. And I can't tell you how we tweaked 4 or 5 different things. And then we found out that in one use case, one company had bought a couple hundred of them to mount in places like in corners of ER rooms and in weird spots where the ventilation was almost zero. And because we took the steps for extreme scenarios, they never overheated. They ran hot, and I'm sure their lifespans are lowered. But we're talking about, a 20-year lifespan to a 15 on a product that's going to be, that's out of date in 5 years anyway. So it was perfect. So designing to those extra tolerances is always a good thing. It shouldn't be your minimum base level, but definitely leave it in there while you're actually doing the design.
Yeah, and the other argument is, if you're going to be ordering 100, 200 of a PCB, making it Enig or hard gold instead of Hazel is not going to be adding a whole lot to the cost. So we might as well go for it.
Yeah, what are we talking about? Like a couple of like 50 cents to the dollar?
Where I order from, it's flat rate $15 no matter what size of run you go. So,
but I think what you talked about before was the problem isn't the cost. The problem is the awareness and knowing what to ask for, and navigating these different CMs, contract manufacturers that make these boards, like what to ask for. Sometimes they call them gold fingers, beveled gold fingers, right? So there's your beveled edge and your gold fingers. Sometimes they call them hard electroplated gold. It's like you got to just get experience into knowing what to ask for.
But that's exactly why I love shit like this. Not to promote our own fucking podcast, but that's why I love shit like this. That's why I love friendly arguments like this, because a lot of times too, if you make the same thing over and over and it's working perfect, you have that mentality, and I'm guilty of this too, of like, but it's been working fine. I did my research, but I didn't know any better. So that's why I love arguing with other nerds that actually take the patience to sit there and be like, no, Bob, you think you know what you're talking about, but you got to take a fucking deep breath for a minute. And I can't tell you how many times I've benefited from it. So keep arguing, nerds. I love it.
All right, I'll go next. If everyone's done on that, no? Yeah.
Oh yeah, we done this topic.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
I'll go. So besides getting my Dr. Pepper costume in the mail today, which, by the way, I think I legally have to say that this costume was provided to me by Dr. Pepper for free, so technically this entire video is an ad.
That's a lie. You've always dressed like that.
Last 2 weeks I've been reading this book pretty hard. It's called Wavelets and Subband Coding. I haven't actually been reading it for the wavelets portion. I've been reading it because it has a really good discussion on sampling analog to digital signals. And I think there's some really interesting stuff in there. In particular, if you think about if you were to ask how would you take an analog signal and turn it into digital, the obvious way is to every certain period of time, like let's just pretend every 1 second, you just measure your analog signal and you write that value down as a sample. And if you do that frequently enough, you can recreate that analog signal if you want to. It's a common result in signal processing. But when you get into more advanced ways of doing this, there are times where it actually doesn't make sense to record the value of that analog waveform at that time. You would actually record something else, a filtered version of that waveform, and that would allow you to get around certain issues or make improvements to how you compress something, or depending on what kind of processing you want to do to it. And so the reason I've kind of been really studying up on this is there's a very interesting application to interpolation or upsampling of signals. It turns out that if you record these values in a special way, you can get a much better result if you were to take a 240p image, let's pretend, and blow it up to 480p. You can do that in a way, if you've recorded these samples in a special manner, where you get a exceedingly better result at expanding the image resolution. So that's kind of what I've been going at lately.
Cool. Is that like non-uniform sampling, man? Or...
No, it's not non-uniform sampling. It's so I mean, in the base case, right? Your kernel is a sync function, right? At every sample, you would fill in a sync, which is just sine of x over x. You put that in, and you add all those up, and that recreates your original signal, right? The idea here is you're using something besides a sync waveform. So I guess a super simple example you could think of is you would never be able to perfectly recreate like a step function in a finite number of samples using a bunch of syncs that you add up, right? You need infinite of them, and that's Gibbs phenomenon. But if your function was, instead of a sync waveform, just a step function itself, you could do it perfectly with a single sample. It takes some drawing out to do. You would see it immediately if I drew it out. But it's basically just changing your basis function that you are sampling with, essentially.
I think I've seen this before. I think there was a guy on NES forums who dealt with a lot of audio, and he was using band-limited steps as the basis function to create, I guess, a more perfect emulation of NES sounds or something like that.
Okay, yeah, I can see how that might happen.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're doing linear interpolation, your basis function in that case is your little triangle filter, right? Instead of a sync. So it's just generalizing the concept of sampling so that you can achieve whatever you want to achieve out of it.
Cool.
Zach, you want to go next?
Sure. A lot of oh shit, a lot of good things have been happening lately. I'm sorry. A lot of stuff I've been working on. The rain has kind of rained me out, so it's kind of put the research and development facilities outside on a temporary hiatus. I have been doing a lot of catch up on a lot of mod work that I've been in receipt of. I have spent a lot of time sort of trying to polish out my YouTube channel and trying to increase the frequency of releasing these videos. I just released 2 videos almost back to back, and AES stuff is still very much happening.
You deserve a golf clap for the second video, Zach. That was very well done. All the zoom ins and everything were crystal clear and perfect. I did like that one. No sarcasm. I know I'm smiling. I'm not being silly. I love those. I love the zoom ins. I love showing all the tricks.
Which is the first and which is the second?
The second one is the tutorial of how to do the PC Engine RGB mod.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yep.
What was the first one, though, Bob?
I don't know, Zach. Why don't you tune into my podcast tomorrow morning to find out?
So anyways, that's something else I've really been trying to, I've made a couple of these now, but I've really tried to work out these really nice tight angles. And it almost looks like a microscope capture, right? It's really, 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 these really tight shots. And I'm trying to just make everything flow really well. So I hope people like those, and they seem to. So, the YouTube stuff is going to be, I think, a very important staple of the kind of content that I provide. Not only the stuff that I design and sell, but, this is how you can do it like a real, I won't say man because the SJWs will come after me, but how a real gender fluid person would do it.
Don't judge by gender, man. A couple people bought my boards over the years and tweeted pics at me, and some of them were ladies and some of them were dudes, and they all did a better job than I did.
I love all people, Bob. All people. We're all equal on this earth. I'm done.
I'll go. Zach helped me with something I had a theory upon but haven't proven for a long time. In that we worked on one-chip SNES testing. And a few people over the years had strongly opposed my opinion on this, and we proved it live on stream. So there's a couple of things. If you put a 7374, which is the THS video amp, in a SNES one-chip 01, 02, 03, or a Mini, they all look identical. Also, if you try to bypass the one chip to itself, so like in the Mini, if you connect the RGB lines to the sRGB video amp, it looks great if you do it right. If you do that with a one chip, it's still kind of, I don't want to say blurry because it's still a great image, but it's not as clear as if you do the bypass. So there's obviously a little bit of noise or something coming off the board. It's still perfectly fine stock, but if you're an insane perfectionist like I am, but the other thing that we learned, too, is that there really isn't a better version of the one chip. Because for years I've been hearing the O2s are garbage and the O3s are the best. And I have 9 at the moment, and I've probably had, without exaggerating, 30 where I kind of used for testing and moved along over the years. And I guarantee you, I'm not a betting man, but I would bet my D32 monitor that if you bought 100 one-chip 01s, 102s, 3s, and you test all of them, they'll average out identical. Now, what we did find is what we all know. Some of them have more wear and tear than others. Some of them probably needed a cap replacement or something. Or even in the components on the board, each resistor, I guarantee Nintendo didn't use 1% tolerant resistors on everything. They probably used 5%, because nobody back then was putting it through a BVM or a high-end capture card. So essentially, all of the one chips are the same. Maybe you'll roll the dice, get lucky, and get a crystal clear one. Maybe yours won't be as clear, but it's still totally fine. And if you do the amp bypass with a properly built amp board, then you're going to get just a perfect signal, regardless if it's a one chip or a mini. So those are things that I've been kind of arguing for years. Same things like, when you do the bypass, the white line goes away. I can't tell you. I should have saved them all. I can't tell you how many messages I've got from people telling me that, I'm just lying to sell boards or something. But we've proved all of that over the years. So that was
you just lie regardless of anything. And that's
clearly,
just sell boards.
Clearly. And this isn't even Oktoberfest. I put ginger ale in it to look like one of the cool kids. Yeah, so I was very excited about that because I'd always had my theories, and yeah, hopefully later on we'll get a chance to talk about what's the best revision of the 2-chip, because there's a lot of people that ask that question too. But I was excited that we finally put that one to bed unequivocally. Unfortunately, some people came in late in the video, and I saw a lot of people afterwards posting that it was definitive that the 1-chip O2 was the best. It's definitely not the conclusion we came to. They're all the same. Hopefully you'll get lucky to find one of the better ones, or if not, just do a bypass.
That's right.
Did I miss anything, Zach? You were there for that whole 3-hour marathon, so.
Yeah, don't worry, Voultar. It's only going to take about an hour and a half. Okay, man, because I've got business to attend to. Oh, don't worry. 2 hours
said about
max.
2 hours, and it took 3.
Doesn't matter. But since you've mentioned that, a lot of people that saw those, they were confused about the brightness, the very subtle brightness differences, even when you use the same amp across. It was the same board that Bob was removing. He was just putting it in different systems, but there might have been a slight fluctuation in the brightness output. And I explained that, and I guess I'll talk about it really quick. People were kind of on to me for when I did all these measurements. Voultar's wrong. This is what the output is. This is what the peak voltage is. There's a wide swing on this SNES 1-chip ASIC. It can be a couple hundred millivolts at times. So what I did was I averaged out and kind of skewed the attenuation to go maybe just a little bit darker. But it was an averaging of 20 plus SNES 1 chips, and to get that dialed in. So just because the output is not stateful across the board, there is a considerable variance. So keep that in mind. Just keep that in mind when you look at 1-chip stuff. That's all. And Steve knows that. Steve, you can comment on that too.
I mean, yeah, welcome to the world of being hated by people who think you're full of crap when you're doing measurements.
Sure.
I think I kind of was one of the first to get crap for that. So yeah, the 1-chip ASIC, it varies a lot, and yeah, I was helping Voultar, trying to think of probably the best middle ground, not necessarily the in middle average, but you kind of want to skew a little dark, because if something's too bright, it'll clip and it'll be distorted. So you're better off skewing towards something a little darker, and then you could just adjust that later.
Right, because cranking up the brightness a hair just makes the picture brighter. But if the picture's too bright and you have to turn the brightness down, you're actually losing clarity, and things are getting washed out in the process.
You're losing content when you do that.
It's just like with audio, with something clips, right? If something's too loud, it clips. If you turn the volume down after it's clipped, it's still already messed up. You can't fix it.
You're hitting me right here, Steve. You're hitting me right here. When I recorded the album, it was all the whole first mixes were clipping, and no one could hear the distortion but me.
Is another way to put this that if I had a 1-chip O2, and then I took randomly another 1-chip O2 and a 1-chip O3, the chance that there will be a measurable difference between these things is equal. So my 1-chip O2 might be just as different from another 1-chip O2 as it might be from a 1-chip O3.
Yeah, so
that's right.
Wait, hold on though. I have to stop everybody right here. when you're talking about plugging this thing into, let's say, a fully calibrated BVM in great condition, or an OSSC into a great TV, you might not notice the difference. If you're talking about people that are doing testing for research and design purposes, and then you take that SNES into an OSSC into a capture card, and you zoom in 100 times into Link's face, yes, absolutely. But if you're actually talking about standing 2 feet away, even a foot away from a BVM, that's even the highest quality equipment, you might actually not even notice at all those differences when you're actually playing. It's only when you're analyzing for research.
Sure,
but you were 100% correct.
I'm
but the
putting aside the like human perception aspect of this and just like measurable differences.
So the 0203 thing, that's the board revision. What Voultar was pointing out is that the chip that's populated on these boards is where the variation is in the contrast levels for the RGB and lines.
The SCPU-N chip, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to mention that because, several hours were spent sampling data for all of these different systems and in multiple samples. And I didn't take the attenuation there lightly at all. And there's I know that people another popular thing too is to current limit the DAC. Well, I've done some experimenting with that, and I don't know if that's the best thing to do. Because I've seen peak voltage output off the thing just plummet when you do that on a case by case basis. So you gotta hit a good middle ground here, fellas. That's all I'm saying. And when you see those mild variations, you're talking about a negligible, but unfortunately, it's just a negligible difference that unfortunately there's nothing we can do about unless we just scope plots on all of these and just build on a case by case. This is just how this is analog electronics 101,
So when you're talking about doing the research, everything you just said was correct. But when you're talking about real life practices, first of all, that dropping the voltage down in the chip, it's not for everybody. Whereas adding one of these amps, you need basic skills to do this. It's not complicated. And to that same point, even if theoretically we started a worldwide thing where everybody scopes the chip to figure out, it doesn't matter. You're still gonna fix the issue just by throwing in a THS amp into the one chips. So I don't see the point of either of those. It's that simple.
And then it's that easy. It's that easy, Bob.
Oh God, I screwed it up again.
I just want to jump in and say one thing here. As we were talking about the signal clipping earlier, if you have too much brightness, and then I think Voultar said you're losing content when you're clipping. And I just want to correct that. If you clip a signal, what's actually happening is that you're adding frequency content that wasn't there to begin with.
Right, but you're losing content though in the process of doing that. You're overriding the detail in the video content that was there with a clipped distortion signal, right?
But the overall the spectral effect is that you're adding frequencies that were not there because of the clipping.
It's just like when you don't low pass.
Yeah.
Right. It's just like when you don't low pass video, like analog video for low SD bandwidth content. You don't low pass that, and you hook it up to something that doesn't do that for you, and you get all those aliasing effects. You're losing video content because you have all that high frequency content jamming itself in there, and so what you're supposed to see, you don't see. Is what I'm saying.
Well, like Nick said, both are right. It's you're adding stuff that wasn't there, and you're losing, right? So it's not just one side.
Oh, you're right. Yes, you're absolutely right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because if you take a slow-moving signal and eventually that slow-moving signal goes too high in clips and becomes flat where it should have continued to be a slow-moving signal, that's all of a sudden a high-frequency effect, right?
Correct. Absolutely.
So it's the same thing. All right, Steve's turn.
So something I want to talk about is kind of based on, or I got back into it because of stuff I've been working on with Dreamcast work that I've been doing. And it's something I kind of mentioned before when I was talking about video switches, where I mentioned solid state switches for video were difficult to design properly, and I mentioned two kind of aspects. One is with solid state switches, you need the correct voltage swing to pass your whole video signal. Otherwise, you'll clip or saturate, just like we talked about before. And the other thing is there's a lot of parasitics in solid-state switching devices and transistors. And probably the biggest parasitic is capacitances all around your transistors. And
can you define a parasitic for people?
A parasitic is, let's say you have a inductor, and it's like 1 microhenry. Well, that inductor also has something called series resistance because it's made out of wire, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you model it as just like a resistor in series with it, and it's something you don't typically think is there, but it is there. And there's if you have 2 wires running next to each other, there's a parasitic capacitance between them because anything with 2 pieces of metal and there's a voltage on one, there's an electric field between the 2 pieces of metal, and that's a capacitor. So That's a parasitic capacitance. So it's like extra circuit components that are there that aren't intended to be there, and you don't really see because in a lot of situations their magnitude isn't enough for you to even consider them being there. So one thing I was messing around with, this is kind of related to like switches, and so an ideal switch, right? I wonder if this will show up.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
So ideal switch, you have 2 states. You have the off state, and it's just an open, and then on an on state, it's just a piece of wire. That's an ideal switch. So if you want to use a solid state version, a really common thing we use nowadays are MOSFETs, metal oxide semiconductor field effect transistors. I'm just going to call them FETs. So a FET, if you replace this ideal switch with a FET, there are some parasitics you got to think of because you're not physically opening a wire up. You're kind of changing how the silicon is affecting electron flow. So one thing when the transistor is on, and this is common knowledge with FETs, is when your transistor is on, there's something called the RDS on. It's the resistance, the effective resistance you get when you put enough voltage into the transistor to turn it on. And on a lot of transistors, this is small, right? This is like milliohms for a lot of like switching power supplies and all stuff like that. They could go up to like a few ohms, depending on how the transistor was fabricated. But there are a lot of parasitics involved with FETs, and like I found this nice Toshiba app note that kind of shows the various capacitances around the FETs. You got the FET here, and you got through all the terminals, you got these capacitances. And so even when the transistor is off, when you want it not doing anything, you want it to be like it's not even in your circuit, it's kind of looking like this. It's kind of a capacitor. So that can have, depending on your content, it can have a huge effect on what you're trying to do. And I think one example that I could try to run down if I'm not already confused everybody is let's say you have, I got all these printouts. I'm totally doing this old school. Listening in the car, like,
I think it's working though.
Can go and look this up if they're interested. But let's say you got some signal and you're delivering it to some load over here, but you want to have like a microcontroller or something to maybe switch in this extra resistor to attenuate it. So let's say you have like a Raspberry Pi here, and you want to turn this FET on for some reason. Like you have 2 states. You want it off, so this just passes normally, or you want to turn it on to add an additional attenuation down through here. But if this is off, let's say this is 0 volts, you still got all these capacitances in here. And so if your signal is high enough frequency, there's going to be this leakage through your capacitors to ground. So when you want this off, it's not fully off. So that can like kind of screw with a lot of high frequency content. So when this is on, like I showed earlier, it's just like a little resistor here that's almost like a short to ground. So all these capacitances don't matter, right? They're drowned out when it's on, which is what you want. But when it's off, that's when you get these problems. And so that's a huge thing on what you got to be careful of when you're dealing with FETs and solid state switching is not just the on state. You not only want low on resistance in a lot of applications, you want the off state capacitances to be low. And they kind of publish this stuff, but I got it highlighted here. They got some of these capacitances published in the data sheets, but the problem is, and I don't know if you can see this, but these capacitances are not only nonlinear, they're not constant. These measurements were taken at certain voltages across the transistor. So another reason to use SPICE, in my opinion, is there's models. The SPICE models take all this into account. So they have this is how the SPICE model is drawn up, and inside when you're running it, you got all the equations, and it's doing all these equations and calculating the capacitances for you based on how much voltage you have across. And so you could see a lot of these effects in simulation as long as the device manufacturer gives you a model for it. And so you could catch a lot of this stuff early if something like this can affect the performance of your circuit or whatever you're trying to do with it. So I mean, another reason that I really like running stuff through simulation is you catch a lot of this stuff. You might not necessarily catch on the bench when breadboarding or something like that, because breadboards have their own capacitances and affect everything. And until you get to like a board spin, then it might be too late to like switch some things around and try to avoid these problems.
Very good, Steve.
I don't know if that made sense.
On a related note, I just wanted to say, as soon as we can monetize this channel, the first thing all the money will go towards is buying Seedi, like a digital version of an overhead projector where you can put all this stuff on screen and use like markers and stuff.
Yeah, and to upgrade his flip phone to an iPhone.
Yeah.
Could you tell the resistor story, because I think it ties directly in with what you just said.
Before he tells,
holding his Canadian finger up.
Go first.
Before René.
Before he tells the resistor story, so Steve, in essence, and to summarize, is that you're saying the parasitic capacitances on these FETs can AC couple a high frequency content like a video signal if you're trying to switch it on and off with the MOSFET.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's why you got to be careful when you're designing switches for video. That's one of the problems that you see in cheaply made powered solid state video switching devices.
So I will add to that. I used to use a powered component switch with the HD retroversion cables, and it totally messed up the signal. And I switched to mechanical switches, and everything's nice and perfect with the HD retroversion cables.
So what was the effect? Did it blur? Like it was creating a smoothing filter and killing high frequency stuff, or?
There was multiple issues. Is one, the power supply was adding noise to the video. I could clearly see, the 60 hertz inside of the on the video signal, right? The kind of slow rolling lines.
Right.
It definitely messed with high brightness images. Like a full white was skewed, and it was messing with the sync.
That might be a saturation clipping problem too.
And like you said, the level of detail was much lower. So, and all those problems go away with the mechanical switch.
Right, because they're like I showed in the beginning. They're either they have their own parasitics too, but it's much less. Like if you have an open like this, if you have two metal contacts, there's still capacitance between those contacts. It's it's like femtofarads versus picofarads, which is what we're getting in the data sheets for these FETs. So, and there's inductances too when the switch is on. So,
sweet, that was an awesome topic.
Mm-hmm.
So we going on to the group stuff?
Oh yeah.
Damn.
All
What
right.
about the resistor story? I wanted the resistor story.
God damn it, Bob. Yeah, tell us the
needy.
resistor story.
What's the resistor story?
That you and 2 resistors one night laid and involved some peanut butter.
Oh, but this has nothing to do with anything I just talked about.
Yeah, but it does, because you talk about designing all of these things, right? And you talk about analyzing all of these different scenarios, and you bend over backwards to make sure that you run your models through Spice, which I'm pissed that I forgot to wear my Dune shirt. But I understand all of that. And you told the story, I think you posted one on YouTube, and I'm going to steal your story because fuck it if you don't remember it. And you were talking about how you looked at something that you designed a while back, and you're like,
I
why
remember.
is there another resistor? That's fucking.
Right.
I'm an idiot. Why would I put that? And then you went back through, and that really, really hit home with me because of all the research we've done on little projects, and that at that last company that I freaking loved that I worked for, and the same thing must have happened to me 3 or 4 times where I kept detailed notes, but all of us would look at it and be like, Bob, why'd you do that? That's fucking stupid. I'm like, I know, that is stupid. Let me check my notes.
Yeah,
Oh no, it's not stupid, and this is why, and you were the one that proved it. Like,
yeah, you have to. This happens a lot in design where like you design something and you probably spent maybe half a day distilling down into like what you actually chose, and you do it and you move on to the next thing, and then a year later you're like, why the hell did I do this? Like, this is dumb. I should have done it like that. I'm like, all right, I'll redesign, and then you're going through the same exact processes that you did a year ago, and you end up with the exact same result. And it's hard to have people understand that unless they've done it before, unless they've designed stuff before and experienced that type of feeling. But you get these people who are saying, "Oh, you're dumb. You should have done it like this," and like there's all these things that they're not considering and don't have the information to help you make that decision while you did. Even if you don't remember exactly why it is like this, it's likely that you designed it better than how they are telling you did it wrong. So
you're inadvertently making a great case for documenting what you do.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I was thinking this exact same thing, but you can't take notes for everything. Like,
Sure.
There's no way. If you
Right.
If I spent all the time taking notes on everything I did over the last week, then
it would kill your time, but yeah.
No way.
There's a parallel for this in software dev, right? This happens to me all the time at work writing code. If you don't comment every single line of code that is not 100% obvious in what it does, you're going to question it 2 months down the road because you're not going to remember your thought process. And you're going to do exactly like what Steve said. You're going to go through all the design again because you think you'd be stupid, and you'll come out with the same exact solution.
It's an art form in both cases. You have to understand when to put a comment in your code and when not to put the comment in your code.
And if you're going to bother making a comment, make it something that everybody can understand. That's the thing that I learned too. That's why I got kind of good at the documentation of stuff, which is, all of retro RGB is just, I can't tell you how many times back in the day I'd leave myself notes and it would be like blue thing on the left. What? The fuck is the blue thing on the left? Like, so I made sure to actually write down and explain the important stuff. So yeah, totally, 100%.
Cool.
All right, so I think next up we are going to do a full-fledged, detailed review of the OSSC, which both René and I received recently.
You guys worked hard on this.
Version 1.6?
Yeah. We spent a lot of time analyzing this and watching YouTube
Really hard.
videos, learning how to give a review of a product. So I think René was going to start us out, right, with his review.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to say a few things about it. Right, I'm going to say, number one, the quality of the OSSC is amazing. Unfortunately, the SNES did not work with my 42-inch Toshiba from 2011, but I think that was to be expected. Works perfectly on a Samsung. I thought the OSSC is an excellent tool, but it's not user-friendly at all. right? It's not meant to be an end consumer product. There's like a million menus to go through. It's not plug and play as much as you'd want it to be. And other than that, it's great. And now onto the real review material.
Yep.
But if you're going to do a real review, I thought you have to be like 5 feet behind the camera and barely being able to hear you.
Damn it, Bob, don't interrupt this. I've been waiting for them to show this for months.
So I mean, after a lot of extensive research, I have determined that the OSSC is comparable in size to my tiny SCART to HDMI upscaler, right? Not in quality, but in size, right? So, I mean, if you have a setup that's been using one of these and you're limited on space, the OSSC might be a good option for you.
I have determined that the OSSC is approximately the same size as a Sega Genesis Castlevania Bloodlines cartridge. Like, if you put them up, it's like, it's damn close.
Well, see, Nick, I will counter that by saying that the OSSC does not compare in awesomeness or in processing power to a Neo Geo AES cartridge.
Yeah, that's definitely bigger.
You could easily fit like 3 of these in an AES case. No questions asked.
I would think like more comparable is the SNES Classic. They are much. I mean, the SNES Classic is bigger, but they're about the same size. I mean, they're relatively close.
Well, so another thing that I thought the OSSC did is it kind of tries to solve a lot of problems for you into connecting a whole bunch of different inputs, console outputs, converting them to HDMI. And I also found another product that it's comparable in size to, and this also prevents a lot of problems, is this box of tampons.
Oh my god, dude.
Yeah. Oh, input and output, for sure.
Oh my god.
Input and output.
Figured it out.
Another product that I have that also has inputs and outputs and is about the same size is this guitar pedal. It's a chorus pedal, it's real close. I mean, if you put them next to each other, they're like the same size.
Which one looks better on a shelf, Nick? Can you comment on that?
That's a great question. My guitar pedal's a little old, so I'll go with the OSSC. Looks better on the shelf.
All right, you've got me sold. Thank you.
You didn't research that. So the OSSC has some acrylic plastic cutout, and I thought, what a great time to compare it to this 3D printed lizard.
That's real close. The OSSC also now on 1.6 does audio through the HDMI, and this is a musical instrument that also makes sound. It's an African mbira. It's quite a bit bigger than the OSSC, though. So, you know.
Holy shit.
The last thing I want to compare it to is this 3D printed GameCube digital connector. Right? I don't know how it's related, but this is a nice thing that I 3D printed.
LG3D, what are you doing with that? Just out of curiosity.
Clearly comparing it to the OSSC.
GameCube.
The OSSC, you can put signals through it, and so I thought it would make sense to compare it to this giant bundle of Ethernet cables, and the Ethernet bundle is a lot bigger. So, yeah, that's my. Jesus.
Was I supposed to be keeping a straight face? Because I fucking couldn't.
Hey guys, I was taking notes. So.
I think if I've learned anything from all of this is that the giant bundle of Ethernet cables will be better at handling signals than the OSSC.
Yeah, but the question about the Ethernet cables, is it Cat 5, Cat 5e, or Cat 6? Because I can't make a decision without knowing that. I'm kind of embarrassed that you didn't put that information out there, quite frankly.
Actually, some of these are antenna cables. I think this one's it's a Cat 5. Anyway.
Okay, got it.
Zach, are
How
you
do you guys not have 500,000 followers each with reviews like that?
So that completes our comprehensive review of the OSSC.
So I got notes. So next year, if you need to revisit this, or someone tells you that that the OSSC is really smaller than that tampon box. You could show them that it's not, because I got it right here. I got Bloodlines cartridge about the same size, AES case, you probably fit 3 OSSCs. Tampon box, much bigger.
All right, I gotta fucking piss you.
But wait a minute, René.
So Zach, Zach. Steve, you did note that the tampon box follows from Castlevania Bloodlines, right?
Yes.
Oh God.
Oh,
Jesus.
I didn't even catch that joke.
Can you? But I don't think anyone's interested in the box. Can you compare the OSSC's dimensions to a used tampon?
I'm not opening that box.
but the important point you made was that it provides similar inputs and outputs.
Protection. And solves problems for inputs and outputs. Yeah.
Sorry.
Cool.
All right.
Jack, I think you were trying to imply that we had to do actual research for our review videws.
Well,
are you also implying that YouTubers must do real research?
René, hold on a second. Don't get mad at me because you didn't do your due diligence and you didn't show me a used tampon next to the OSSC. That's not my fault. So don't get all butthurt at me, pal.
I am butthurt. I'm going to ban you from my channel.
Did you just block me from Twitter because
I did.
I had a different point of view?
I think you should have done the teardown on the tampon box first.
Like, I know you make your living off this, René, but please do your homework.
Is Bob dead?
I think he whizzed his pants or shorts or maybe.
He probably jerked so hard from laughter that he's now in full paralysis as a result of his back injury.
I thought he was already into wearing a muumuu, so this didn't matter anyway.
I don't know.
He went from vertical to horizontal, and then he.
Right.
That's what happened.
The camera's not catching it.
All right, so let's go on to the next topic. If maybe, there he is.
Jesus, guys.
You doing all right there?
What the hell's wrong, Bob?
I was keeping a straight face, and when I saw Steve start to diligently take notes, it sent me into a giggle fit like a fucking child. I'm not even drunk or high. I wish I was, though. Holy shit.
All right,
is this
Bob,
the first
we were about
podcast
to...
where you're not drinking?
Huh?
I said, is this the first podcast where you're actually not drinking?
Oh, no, of course I am. I just not much.
Oh, okay.
This is the first podcast where he's not mixing it with pharmaceutical painkillers.
Yeah, and this is the first one where I legally could completely do that, but I'm actually not. All I'm on is the anti-inflammatories, so my back doesn't give out while I'm standing here.
All right, Bob. Well, welcome back. We're going to go on and talk about the topic du jour, the Seedi retro system.
I'm ready.
Am I the only one that barely even gives a shit about this?
You might be. So for those who are not aware, an Indiegogo popped up 2 weeks ago, maybe, called the Seedi retro system. Maybe not the best choice of name, but we'll give them a break on that. Which is essentially a clone console with emulators, trying to give you an alternative to playing your PlayStation 1, Neo Geo CD, whatever the other ones were.
Turbo.
Yeah. You know, the early stage CD games, which is a noble goal. I think we all agree that a product that can do this well is needed because, as some of us know, you can get these systems and they, like a Sega CD, and they just totally don't work. And trying to fix them is a huge pain in the ass.
You might be exaggerating by some of us, Nick.
Yeah, and then the eBay seller Nick bought it from argued and said that he broke it.
Yeah. In any case, we know this a product like this needs to exist. But I got into a bit of a giant Twitter war last week because I suggested that maybe using copyrighted BIOSes was not the best idea. So this is a big problem with this system because they're not providing you with the BIOS. So I don't know the legal background to evaluate whether they could actually get in trouble for this, but because they're not actually including a BIOS for the PlayStation 1 or whatever when they ship, but they are providing you with instructions for how to acquire a copyrighted BIOS illegally in order to make their product work. That's the background. So I don't know if anyone here has any objections to this product on any other grounds. This is like my main problem with it.
I think I'm going to jump in and say people have been comparing this to, oh, well, if you download an emulator on your computer for, Sega CD or PlayStation, you also need to download the BIOS to make it work.
Which is
true.
I
think the big difference here is that no one's making any money off that emulator. No one's asking you to buy that piece of hardware and download the emulator, right? I think that's the big difference here. CD is going to make money off of this, and to get advertised functionality, you must get that BIOS. Otherwise, it's not going to work as advertised. I think that's the major difference here between comparing it to a free and open source emulator online versus this piece of hardware that you have to purchase.
Yeah, and my problem with that, I totally agree. There's a huge difference there, but I mean, in both cases, the end user is doing something that breaks the law, right? You're stealing copyrighted code, effectively.
Yeah, and there's no gray area there.
Yeah. However, a huge difference comes because I believe that products like this are effectively distributing out the blame, right? Rather than them doing the illegal act and giving you the product. They are giving you a product and forcing 1 million people, let's say, if that many people were to buy it, to perform this illegal act to make their product work. And many of those people may not even understand the fact that what they're doing is wrong, an illegal standpoint or moral standpoint. So that's where a big issue comes from me. I mean, I think when you're talking about just your generic emulators, sure, we all know that what's going on there is not above board, but this takes it to another level, in my opinion.
So it's like they're selling this product that provides these functions, and they're kind of like giving you 90% of it, and then these are the instructions on how to steal the other 10% or something. Is that roughly how you're phrasing it?
Yeah, that sounds
to get it to work, which you need 100%. Here's the stuff. You paid us. Here is the 90% of everything you need, but it's not going to work unless you do this. This is how you do it. Go ahead and do it.
Well, I look at it like this. It is a commercial product that has this big, grand advertisement of everything that it does and supports.
It has a targeted functionality, right?
Correct. It's geared specifically for a very specific purpose, right? But the problem is in order to obtain that full spectrum of functionality that they advertise, you have to break the law.
Yeah.
So that's my whole point of contention. And when they're approached or they're asked about that, they really like to skirt that issue, and that to me is even more. That just further infuriates me, because rather than address it boldly, they just kind of skirt around it. I guess kind of like an act of moral vanity where they don't look like a bunch of cunts. They just assume to kind of skirt it and sidestep it and not really address it. At least that's the experience that I had, because I'm pretty sure we had about a Tolkien novel's worth of Twitter responses back and forth. And I know that when they were questioned directly and probed by people like Bob, their responses did anything but acknowledge or were a response to Bob's inquiries. So
wasn't there a main argument like this is equivalent to selling you a retro computer and you have to go download MS-DOS and install it?
Yeah,
sure.
Sort of. And
even though
MS-DOS I got some strong feelings about all this. I know Nick and I don't usually see eye to eye about emulation and ROMs and stuff like that, but the three things that you guys nailed is if this was, which something I actually would like, if this was like hey, this is a Blu-ray drive that plugs directly into your Raspberry Pi. Part of the cost comes with the Blu-ray licensing, so you can get to the menus. And oh yeah, by the way, it does emulators, but we'll help you out with that, but you kind of got to do that on your own. I would be 100% behind it. That's actually something I would use. And if anybody argued about the BIOS thing, it's like it's not what it's designed for. Let's let that go. Or if they said we wrote our own BIOSes for all these, so we are using open source software that in the licensing it says we're allowed to use this, and we wrote our own BIOSes, so here you go. Then yeah, I mean anybody has a problem with that, there is no issue. So all of those things, but I think the thing that struck me the most, because while I'm a hardcore nerd at heart, all of the jobs that I've had were customer facing, and I'm not a salesman at heart. I'm a shitty salesman. But when you treat customers, they're in the middle of an Indiegogo campaign, and they were asked point blank, serious questions in a nice way, not a dick way. And the haha yeah, that's not a response. Haha yeah is not how you treat customers when you're trying to fund something. So that's the thing that really lit me up about them, that I lost all respect for, when they wouldn't answer legitimate, serious questions.
Yeah, they actually, in their initial response was to completely ignore everything that I was saying and a lot of other people were backing me up on, and then make a joke about it. And then a few days later, they really quickly changed their tune. I don't know why. Maybe more people were hammering them on it. But then all of a sudden they wanted to get into a discussion with me about morality and ethics, comparing it to people downloading ROMs and this kind of thing. And I mean, that's really besides the point.
Well,
yeah,
that's another issue.
And ethics is something I'll argue, because if it's something like I buy a PC and I download an emulator and I download a BIOS and I download Night Trap for Sega CD, I own all of those things. So if anybody says that I'm doing something morally wrong, they could fuck right off. Walk into my office, check out the 3 Sega CDs I have, my copy of Night Trap. I'm not stealing anything at all.
But the difference is I don't understand this. The difference is you didn't purchase a commercially available turnkey product that is predicated on running this shit, and in order to run this shit per the advertisement, you have to break the fucking law. I don't understand why people get so fucking hung up on this. It's very simple. It's a very simple concept.
Yeah, they're certainly not advertising this as like, hey, buy this product that will play 80% of your PlayStation games, and as like a subtext, if you put this other stuff on there, it'll achieve all this other functionality. This is advertised as a replacement for 5 different systems out of the box. And by the way, we'll give you some instructions, and don't look at the man behind the curtain as to what you're actually doing to get the functionality. Just follow these instructions, connect your thing to Wi-Fi, and be done with it.
Nick, I think that's a really good answer to a question in the chat, which was, what's the difference between downloading the ROMs and downloading the BIOS? Well, there is no difference. The point of the CD is, and you've made it very clear, is that without downloading anything illegally, there's not a lot you can do with this machine.
No, there's zero.
Well, you can play some PlayStation games and MS-DOS games, I think.
Like abandonware, yeah.
Wasn't there a point though? Their argument against this, like, is this something that is this equivalent to like you downloading Windows 3.1? Right? It's so old that who cares, right?
Well, I think the argument against this app is
I thought that's what their response was.
Couldn't they license DOSBox for that?
You might make that argument, but then, on the market in the last year, we've seen a NES Mini and a SNES Mini, right? So companies are still using that IP.
Yeah.
So what right do they have in saying this BIOS is abandonware? Well, no.
Yeah.
Sega owns it.
Right.
They might decide to release a Sega CD Mini next month for all I care.
I mean, you could have made the same argument about the AM2R project. It's like, hey, we're just doing this for free. We're not charging anybody for this. But actually, that doesn't matter because, as we all saw, they came out with Samus Returns for 3DS. Like these things can be resurrected. These things can be resurrected at any
different thing.
How is it a different thing?
Because AM2R not once in any form at any time was even considered a monetization.
But the monetization doesn't matter for copyright.
For copyright, it doesn't. But when you're talking in the context of the CD guys versus that, they're trying to sell a product that's telling you to do something illegal.
Well, their intentions are radically different. Their intentions were radically different. And
whereas Milton just wanted to rebuild his favorite game and share it with the world.
Well, intentions don't matter at all for the law. But I'm not bringing up intentions here. I like the intentions aside. My only point here is that this IP that somebody can just assume is dead and not going to be used by anyone, therefore I can use it however I want, is completely illegitimate because these companies may, in fact, resurrect them for a product at some point.
They know it's wrong. They know it's not just a moral quandary. They understand this problem thoroughly enough to where they know it's wrong to at least ship the device with these BIOSes, and that's why they're without the BIOS. Right, that's why they're not shipping them with the BIOSes, because they would be foolish to do that because they know, despite their lack of real acknowledgement in that, they know what they're doing. That would be totally wrong, right? So it's by the volition of the customer to do that. But nonetheless, what's really disappointing to me about all of this is that this whole exchange that we're having, which is it's a very healthy sort of kind of vigorous back and forth dynamic, was really diluted by a whole other sort of controversy that kind of got skewed into this, and that's concerning, the use of RetroArch on this piece of hardware. And I'm glad that, that I think that's kind of a moot sort of exchange at this point. And I'm glad that we're able to talk about this without getting into the whole. I mean, we definitely need to talk about that, but I think that whole thing took a lot of the steam off of what you're doing isn't right, not because of RetroArch or not because of this, but because you're using IP from other companies to get microcode running for these emulators. That's all I'm saying.
I think you hit the nail on the head with if their claim on who cares, it's old stuff, nobody cares, they would ship it with the BIOSes on.
Sure.
There.
Yeah. Sure.
But that's the exact same as saying, Bob died and his house has been empty for 2 years, so I'm going to go in and take his stuff. Nobody wants it, right? You wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. It's the same thing.
That's what I said, though. That's what I said.
Exactly. I'm agreeing with you. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just making sure, Bob.
But the Libretro thing, the RetroArch, that's something that definitely rubbed me the wrong way because please, and René, I need you to jump in here because you know 1,000 times more than I do about this. But doesn't the software licensing of RetroArch say that you're allowed to use it for stuff like this?
Well, before we get into that, can I give a quick background?
Sorry, Nick.
Okay, sure, go ahead.
Just for the people that might not be aware, the Seedi, for the most part, most of the emulators on there use one of the RetroArch emulators. I think there's one on there that is for the Sega Genesis. That is
Genesis Plus.
Yeah, that is non-commercial, but they actually went and licensed it from the creator, so that's all above board. But whoever's running the Twitter for Libretro, I think his name's Daniel, is very outspoken against the Seedi and other products like the Retro Engine Sigma and all these other, yet another emulator in a box is how they're referred to. They don't want their 7 years or whatever it is of hard work being put onto these commercial products and sold on Kickstarter. So that's kind of the background. I just wanted to lay that out. However, they are all licensed under GPL, open source. So now, René, you can go. Sorry.
Okay, well, first thing you need to clarify is that there's actually two components to that, right? There's Libretro, which is the API, which calls the various functions. I'm not going to really get into that. And there's the RetroArch, which is kind of the front end for all the emulators, right? And they both have different licenses. So before I actually specify which licenses they begin, I want to give a little, like 5-minute overview on open source licensing. And generally, when I speak about open source licensing, I think there's like 3 rough philosophies that people will fall into when they search for and want to use an open source license for their software. Number 1, it's quite simple. It's a simple and permissive. It's a weak copyleft is what it's called. And this would be something like the MIT license. It's short and to the point. It basically lets people do anything they want with your source code as long as they attribute it to you and they don't hold you legally liable for the source code. So the source that they use doesn't actually need to be disclosed, and they can use trademarks or whatnot. So MIT is very permissive. And if we go back to the distinction I made in RetroArch, Libretro is licensed as MIT. So what that means is somebody can take Libretro, make a derivative work, call it open source, but not necessarily have to redisclose their own source.
Mm-hmm.
But they have to say this was based on Libretro.
Yeah, they have to say this is a derivative work of such and such, and these are the original creators. This is the name of the person that did it, and this is the license that they distributed under. So basically, the MIT is all about attribution. The second license, which would be like the Apache license 2.0, is where you're concerned about patents. Similar to the MIT license, but what it does is it provides an express grant of patents from contributors to users. It shares some features with the MIT in that source still doesn't need to be disclosed. And an example of this, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Android is licensed like this.
Mm-hmm, it is.
Yeah. And finally, the license that we're most used to, and the one that RetroArch, which is the emulator front end, is licensed under, would be the GNU GPL v3 license. But the v2 is kind of similar. There's just a vague difference, which is not really important for this discussion.
And most of the emulators are under that same license, correct?
Most people which write source code will just use the GPL because it suits most of the needs. And the main intent of the GPL is that you're concerned about people sharing their improvements to the code. So the GPL is all about
anti-TiVoization. You can't take it, bundle it up into a product, and then not release what you did to it.
Right.
Well, that's V3. V2 allows that. I would say the main philosophy in GPL is you have to disclose the source, right? Yep. So it's all about sharing your improvements. So your source, including derivatives, must be made available under the same license. You can't take a GPL v2 project, make a derivative work, and relicense it under something else. GPL also provides an express grant of patent rights from contributors to users. And because Nick talked about it, I'll just say the difference between V2 and V3 is the TiVoization. What TiVoization is that in GPL v3, you are not allowed to take a piece of software that is licensed under GPL v3 and release a piece of hardware that doesn't allow the end user to modify the software running on that hardware. So you can't close the hardware for a GPL v3 piece of software. The end user has to be able to modify it. So, and the reason why this applies to our discussion is that none of those philosophies include anything about no commercial use, right? So in any license that you pick here, you're allowed to make a derivative work and make money off of it. And this is the main argument from the RetroArch people, right?
Their main argument is that seemingly that you should have to come to them for their blessing and if they don't approve of your product, regardless of how they licensed it, then you shouldn't do it. That seems to be...
Yeah. And I think if you look at the Genesis Plus emulator, right? So it was licensed no commercial use. Seedi went out of their way and they asked permission to use it to it's EKE, the name of the guy. I'm going to say it's pronounced Eki, but whatever. They went to him and they apparently got a license to use it, right? So that to me proves right there that Seedi took the due diligence of approaching the creators and using that piece of software in a legal kind of way. So, I mean, if RetroArch wants people to approach them, or Libretro wants people to approach them and ask for permission to use it in a commercial product, then they should have used a license which prohibits commercial use. They did not do this, and they've been operating their project under GPL v3, which allows commercial use for 7 years. And now all of a sudden they're not happy with the license. And as much as I hated to say, well, tough luck. This is the license that you selected. This license includes, really strong points about sharing derivative works, but unfortunately, it doesn't include anything about prohibiting commercial use. And if they feel this way now, they should have thought about that when they selected a license.
So I have a couple of, and I'm being dead serious. There's no sarcasm in any of my questions, but I have some questions that I really genuinely want to know the answer to. So first of all, just all emotions aside, if somebody chooses a license like that, so let's say you're going to license the code for the wine glass you're drinking. Bear with me here, and we put that today. It's launched today, October 10th, and then a week from now we go, we picked the wrong code, but people are picked the wrong license, and people are already using it. Can you change that code, or do you have to wait that 7-year period?
The original license of whatever you published holds, but you can make all future changes to what you publish under a different license.
So if Wineglass 1.0 is under the license that allows for commercial use, but we change... we upgrade to Wineglass 2.0 and say it's not allowed for public use, people could still use 1.0 for 7 years, but not 2.0.
There's some licenses that allow you to change a license up to a branch point, and some relicensing doesn't allow you to change. Like the GPL allows you to change to all future revisions of the GPL. So anyone who is releasing something under GPL v2, when v3 came out, they were allowed to legally switch to v3, and all changes included in their first release of v3 is strictly v3, and everything before v2 is v2.
But you can't go back 7 years and say all of this stuff that has been published and worked on.
It's not retroactive.
You cannot just all of a sudden change that license to something else because you have regrets.
Right. So Wineglass 1.0 releases today. Zach releases a product next week about it and starts selling them, and then the week after that we say we changed our mind. It doesn't matter. We can't do anything to Zach because he did it in the time where it was legal.
Yeah, and anyone in any amount of future time can take your Wineglass 1.0 and do what they want according to that license until you change to a different license. So if Libretro today decided to change to a non-commercial license, everything up until today is commercially available,
including grandfathered in anybody that had been using and selling up until the time that they changed it.
Yeah, and those people could branch their own project, and then you could have two branches of Libretro, one that's commercial, one that's not.
Okay.
Right, and hypothetically, one license commercial supported by Seedi and one license supported by the group that doesn't want Seedi. Right? This could happen. I'm sure this has happened in many projects in the past.
So okay. the point of all this is, he was the I guess Daniel. I'm not going to say his name. I don't know if that's the person, but he was allowing his emotions to take precedent over logic when he spoke, and
that's right.
I don't think that I don't think he has an argument.
What was the counter argument?
I'm still trying to figure out where the hell those posts were coming from because it made no sense to me.
There were a couple points. He felt that the problem for him was that had they not used the license that they used, it would have killed their project. So they had to take the license that was available to them. Otherwise, people wouldn't have contributed emulators and all this stuff, and whole thing would have died. That was argument one. Second argument I heard from him is these things were all licensed in an era before Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and before people were coming around and just packaging this shit up and selling it as a product. So that was kind of his two main points.
Those both sound like understandable and level-headed points of view. So he's just really, really bad at communicating with people. And this, for the record, anybody listening, this is my opinion. Please don't lump my assholiness into all five of us here. But for what I got from the guy was a bunch of horrendous tweets. Most of them didn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
Yeah, I was confused by a lot of it.
They started to get really nasty. So when he responded to me with one, I just said, "Look, your tweets are toxic." And I then, maybe this is a little kid thing to do, but I blocked him on Twitter, and I just ignored him because I literally don't have time to argue with that shit anymore. And the guy was he seemed so unreasonable. And then the dude starts harassing me on Patreon because I supported him on Patreon. And I saw his message come in. I was like, shit, man, maybe I shouldn't have blocked him. Maybe I was childish. But I'm literally working. I got shit to do. So I finish up whatever I was working on, and I swear, if you guys don't fucking believe me, I will post them. Because I didn't respond fast enough, I got 3 messages from him. So then I just said, well, forget it. I'm not supporting him on Patreon anymore. It's to have a difference of opinion is one thing. I'd still gladly give him my monthly donation, but then to come after me and start harassing me, and then he came back and started harassing me for deleting my pledge to him. So the guy is, once again, my opinion, don't blame the other 4 guys. Guy seems batshit crazy to me. Love his work. Still gonna talk good about his work. Not gonna give him my monthly thing on Patreon because I don't feel like being harassed anymore. But yeah, he just seems out of his mind to me, and I don't want to have anything to do with that dude. And it sucks because a lot of the work that he and the team that worked on it did is spectacular, and we all benefit from it.
Yeah,
so
I think that's the real shame here is that we all kind of support that mission and are fans of what's going on there. Yet this was all, as someone said at the start of this, is all kind of a distraction from the real issues with the Seedi system. Because this is not one. As far as I can tell, they don't seem to be using anything that's licensed non-commercial other than the one emulator that we mentioned that they went and made a deal for.
I thought that the only thing I could make out in all the ramblings, I guess, was one point that I kind of agreed with was that the media coverage of these types of things that are getting released is very just copy and paste, no real research, and people need, like, tech companies that are doing this type of coverage really need to dig in and find out like what's making these things run and what they really are. It's not like, hey, check this out, new revolutionary Seedi system built from ground up. It's although still I think it's difficult to make a product based on different pieces that are already made, but at least explain that, like, okay, this is a RetroArch based system, like just a little background on a little bit what's going on underneath.
Yeah, if you want to get into the gaming journalism, #fake news.
Are we talking about YouTube?
Yeah, but before we switch subjects, though, I want to talk about the licensing just a bit more.
Sure.
Because in those toxic tweets that we're talking about, Libretro went very emotional into not forbidding but condemning the use of condemning the commercial use of his software. And I want to counter these emotional claims with nice researched and logical claims. So
Are we allowed to do that on YouTube? I thought we're not allowed to do logic on YouTube.
You can do logic in the video, just not in the comment section.
Oh, okay. So I mean, why should there be an argument against commercial use, right? So I had a look at the best example in the world of an open source commercial software project, and that obviously is the Linux kernel. So I went on the linuxfoundation.org and I pulled out some numbers. So just a bit of history. The Linux kernel was originally distributed as a no commercial use, like a custom license that Linus Torvalds wrote. And later on, he switched it to GPL v2 because that was more compatible with his worldview, and he thought that the no commercial use was kind of stupid anyways. So, but I mean, and as a side note, can you just imagine the world today if the Linux kernel had remained no commercial use? What kind of world we'd be living in? I mean, everything except the desktop is using Linux. So, okay, side note over. So, is there really an argument against forbidding commercial use? Out of all the patches that are submitted to the Linux kernel, surprisingly, 70% of those patches are demonstrably come from people who are paid for their work. They come from companies like Red Hat, which is a for-profit company, Novell, IBM, unknown companies actually make up 6.4%, but there's still developers that are paid and they contribute to an open source and free software product. And when you put all of those together, 70% of the work on Linux comes from companies that are making a whole bunch of money off of Linux, right? So is there an argument against forbidding commercial use? I don't think so, because commercial companies are the ones who are in the majority of the patches are submitting patches to the Linux kernel. Without commercial use, it would not be in the position that it is today. And as a nice aside, companies that are making a ton of money off of the Linux kernel, like Google, Samsung, and LG, for their TVs, D-Link for their routers, they're not even in the top 10 contributors of Linux. I thought that was surprising. I would have expected Google to be way up there, but it's lesser known companies that are contributing. The point is, though, that commercial use only enhances the product, in my opinion. It'll enhance the code base. It doesn't mean that every company that will make money off of your piece of software will necessarily contribute positively to your piece of software, but given a large enough commercial base, the Linux kernel shows that 70% of commercial companies, or no, 70% of the patches submitted will come from commercial companies, and I think that's a great example.
It sounds like that commercial use of open source is in sync with the spirit of open source.
Yeah.
And that's really what you're saying, is that the spirit of open source is to, hey, I want contributions to this. And
yes,
we're getting contributions in. And I guess the counter argument from RetroArch team or whatever is that we want contributions, but don't make any commercial products at the same time.
Right. They want their cake and ice cream.
Yeah, I think that's nuts, because the commercial products will provide you with something that you can't get out of non-commercial products, and that's a large sample size, right?
Yeah.
If you can get 1 million of something out in the wild, you're going to discover a whole lot more bugs than if you weren't allowing commercial use.
Well, I think you only forgot one point. I agree with everything you just said, but the one point you forgot is time. So if you have a closed commercial product, the life cycle of that product ends when the company who owns that IP goes under. And when you have an open product, time has a huge factor in this, because after the original creators move on to something else, or we're all human, croak, there's still groups of people moving on. And those companies that maybe you thought weren't not thought, but you've seen in your research isn't contributing enough, or not enough, but if it isn't contributing a lot now, over time maybe they'll switch everything over to that and start contributing. Or maybe what they did contribute was as a result of such a huge company using it, they found a very important bug that nobody else did, So just time and time is another big factor that a lot of people don't recognize. So I agree with everything. I just wanted to add that on top of it. So the fourth dimension.
Well, I think we're suffering some stream issues. So in the meantime, I wanted to. I guess people can hear us just fine, but the video's kind of lagged up a little bit. Deal with it. Hashtag deal with it. Just to get back to the point Steve brought up real quick, I agree with you and the guy from Libretro that the media coverage for some reason is very strange regarding this. These things seem to get covered in like Engadget immediately, like even products like the Retro Engine Sigma, which ended up being a huge fail. Like if you just go search Retro Engine Sigma, check out their Indiegogo comments, it's a disaster of people wanting refunds because it doesn't work at all as advertised. I don't understand why this stuff keeps getting covered the way it does.
Yeah, you're definitely hitting a sore spot for me. If you're good in clickbaity, all of those idiots will absolutely post you on the Kotakus and the Gizmodos of the world. But if you have just a decent idea that doesn't make a good headline, you're fucked. And I've seen so many projects over the years barely make funding or not get funding, but as soon as you say, like, hey, SNES Classic is out, do you want to play Super Mario Brothers on a trampoline? And here you go, buy this and it just they all get funded. So yeah, it does annoy the fuck out of me.
Well, what's more erroneous than the sort of puff piece editorials that you see on these crappy publications is it's the YouTube videos that absolutely just leave me in an aghast state. The comments and the sort of the reviews that you watch on, especially with like the Seedi, for example, some of them are just like, you got to be fucking how much how many of those do you get for free?
Yeah, some of them was terrible. Those people are even getting more kickbacks than I get Voultar.
And as a matter of fact, Bob is getting all the kickbacks. And I made a comment. I've been kind of vigorous about this, and I said something about the sort of culture of where people in YouTube, I guess this is their bread and butter, because I don't mean this in any sort of discriminatory way, but I don't consider YouTube a real job for most people. I guess for some people it is a real job, but people who don't have
real job. You mean main job, like full-time main job.
I mean, this is not a tertiary, not a secondary. I mean, your primary source of income.
Yeah, that's how they pay their rent is through this.
I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. I mean, it's fine if you make a living off of it. But the people, this is their full-time job. I've learned that when you're critical of something that they say, or if you have a point of view that is unaligning to their sort of their own special interests, you're ultimately playing with their bread and butter. You're playing with their bread and butter. So when you kind of go out against some of these guys, and you're like, this is why I think, X, Y, and Z, don't really think you're telling the whole story here. Boom, instant ban. Boom, insta kill. Boom, headshot.
I think that definitely holds true for the middle ground guys. I think it's the guys that are that have just switched over to making being a YouTube personality their main source of income. I think the guy is. I mean, and technically we could all be put in this because we're still very small time YouTubers. I think we're just trying to find we're just trying to do what makes us happy and what we think is right. So you don't really find the bullshit with the smaller people. And with the bigger people, they're already making a lot of money. So, like, we all tease them, rightfully so. But like, there's no way that kid paid off Metal Jesus to do the GameCube video review. Like, there's no way that kid was like, here's $1 million, go review this. He did it, and he made a mistake, but whatever. But that's not, I don't think you find the payoffs in the big guys. I think you might find them in the middle ones. And I don't think it's I think it's more slimy than that. I don't think the middle ground YouTube guys view it as payoffs. I think a salesman's very nice to them and gives them something for free, and then they feel very bad giving it a bad review. Whereas sometimes it's actually lucky that I'm an asshole because I've never fallen for that in my life. Whether it was at the company that I worked at where the really awesome salesman took me out to a fancy dinner and, gave me 3 of his products for free, and I mailed them right back and said, there's no fucking way we're using these. Thanks for dinner.
I really, I didn't have anything bad to say or any sort of serious criticism of Metal Jesus Rock's Seedi video. I think he might have straddled a few lines there, but I didn't think it was a bad video.
No, I thought it was pretty accurate overall. He certainly at least mentioned the other side of it.
Sure, but he's I didn't think that was a bad video, but at the same time, he kind of, I can personally attest to this. Metal Jesus Rocks kind of went on a sort of Twitter bandwave of people who weren't as like-minded as he was, and when confronted about it, he just kind of sidestepped that too. So I can't. It's not that I have any sort of beef with people like that, like personally, but it's just awfully hard for me to respect people who, I guess kind of lack that kind of, I guess, that allowance of transparency. That's all I'm saying. About the whole journalistic, faux review, let's just insert X product because it's going to get you 50 bazillion hits by tomorrow. It's really unfortunate that it's kind of come to this, and you have to go to the little guy if you want a more concise and, I guess, honest telling or showing of something that you're interested in. That's just my opinion. It's totally my opinion.
You know what I think is a much more negative result of all this is absolutely not the YouTubers, big or small. It's the weird fanboyism you get from some people.
Oh,
just
sure.
It's a person that you see in the little box on your laptop when you're watching or on your cell phone doesn't mean you have to get insanely mean and defend them to the end of the earth.
Right.
That creeps me out. That creeped me out always because I loved Megadeth growing up, and some of those weird kids were just like, I guess I'm a weird kid too, but the other side of the weird kids were, oh, so you hate Metallica? No, I love them too. I like Megadeth better because Dave Mustaine plays guitar the way I wish I could, but no, I like them both. Well, you can't like them both.
Right.
The only reason you can't like them both is if you're an idiot fanboy.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a very interesting dynamic. It's kind of a good case study of sort of social cultural cells and whatever. It's just it's like I'm in high school again. I don't know.
Well, without getting into whether people are or are not fanboys, I don't really care. I think the point is, for me, that some people interpret criticism as personal. And, yeah, I mean, we had a little fun with Metal Jesus over the GameCube thing. And, but it seems that at a minimum, he's trying to do better with his reviews of products and point out all sides. And like I said before this even happened, like if he does a good review, I'll be the first to say it. And I thought the review was decent. I mean, he's not going to give the most in-depth review ever of a product. I understand that, but he tried to touch on the issues of the BIOS and the fact that Libretro was not supportive of it. And actually, as a bonus, I thought it was very cool of him to mention that Kickstarters and Indiegogos are not pre-order systems. They are donations, and you may get nothing, or you may get a big hunking pile of retro Engine Sigma that doesn't do anything for you.
Sure.
I thought that was, well said at the end there. So,
yeah, I'll go a step further and say, and not just a decent review. I thought it was a good review. I liked that video when I watched it this morning.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I wouldn't have asked that much more out of him. So I thought, no real complaints there. So as hard as we were on him the last time, it was not a personal thing. We just wanted to stop bad reviews from happening that had people spending their money on products that were going to blow up their
misleading reviews.
Say that one more time, Nick. Say it a little more. Say it a little bit more slowly. It was not anything personal.
Yeah.
I think a big issue is people that can't take criticism, and I'm 100% guilty of this, which is why I'm very comfortable dishing out the shit to people. In that sometimes it's really hard to interpret who is being an asshole and who's just firmly explaining to you when you're doing something wrong. And sometimes it's the person who's taking the feedback's fault, mine, and sometimes the person who's writing the feedback. They're in a rush. They don't think how other people, how other people think. So sometimes it's back and forth, but the five of us have been in a couple of situations over the past few months where we came down hard on somebody for doing something kind of not great, and we've all seen the people that took it well, made fun of themselves, grew from it, and I love that. That's who I try to be. I'm not perfect. I'm only human, but that's who I try to be. And then we've seen the people that immediately tense their assholes up and go, no, don't, no, you didn't, you can't, why would you? So I don't like that at all. So yeah, I don't know. It's a hard thing. It's a psychology thing, which always fascinates me, human psychology, by the way. So being able to be in the middle of the internet stuff like this, sometimes I just sit back and watch, and I'm just fascinated by some of the crazies, myself included.
Well, I guess what's maybe hard to differentiate is where is that sort of arbitrary line between constructive criticism and being a fucking cunt. I think a lot of people, and I'm not being a smartass, I really do feel that a lot of people have trouble straddling that. And they don't know the distinction between the two.
You're kind of one of them, Zach.
Fuck off.
that line is certainly blurred on the internet, where there's no intonation in your voice. There's no face-to-face interaction. I've certainly had differences of opinion with people online where it seems a lot more heated than it probably would be if we were just sitting face-to-face talking something out.
Oh, absolutely. That's 99%
Totally agree.
of things. Even emails and business. Like I've exchanged emails with somebody where I'm like, I can't wait to meet this fucking dude. I can't stand him. And then when I hear the words that he typed come out of his mouth, I'm like, oh, he's awesome. I just interpreted it wrong. Zach, I'm sorry to pick on you, man, but before you started making videos, it's very hard to interpret some of the stuff that you say. So some of our first interactions, if I go back and look at them, knowing you now and being friends with you, I'm like, oh, fuck, that was really helpful. But at the time, I was like, is this dude fucking with me?
No, it's just a social disorder.
It's a social hang-up, and the fact that you're just a dumbass. So anyways, let's go on.
No, but that's why I like that you do videos because I don't think anybody that watches your videos will misinterpret anything you say. So maybe that's a big help for a lot of people that are trying to reach out. But I don't.
I want to add one thing about the fanboy thing is that where I think I draw the line is you need to be able to see when somebody makes a mistake, right? You can't blindly follow someone or blindly hate someone for any reason, right? Like, we dished out a lot on Metal Jesus because of that GameCube video, but then today the Seedi video we all agreed was pretty well made for according to his standards, right? So
he did a good job.
We're not blindly hating on him. We're actually evaluating the content as he releases it. Yeah. And I think that's where I draw the line. Is I'm not going to say I blindly like or I blindly hate any particular channel. If a channel I like releases shit, I'm going to say it's shit. And if a channel I usually don't like releases something that's awesome, well, I'm going to say it's awesome. I'm not going to base my opinion of their current release on my opinion of earlier releases, right? Those are completely separate things. I'll evaluate every individual video separately.
Yeah, it's the same through music too. I didn't love the 2 In Flames albums ago, but it's still my favorite band, and I'm not going to drop the band because I didn't like one collection of songs. It's the same thing. I know people that are like, "Fuck them, I hate that album."
Yeah, and I might alienate. I mean, I'm a huge Dream Theater fan, but I thought their latest album sucks complete balls.
Or Saint Anger being the best Metallica
album. I knew you were going to go there. All
right, let's try to answer a few questions before we sign off. We're not going to hit them all because we used up 2 hours. Oh, there goes René.
Oh my God, we just killed René. That was it.
Yeah.
No, Dream Theater did it. Dream Theater was watching him.
Yeah.
They heard the insult and shut him off.
Yeah, he was a little upset. But okay, so question number 1. Would you guys consider creating a Discord channel for the Retro Roundtable or retro modding community in general? Well, it seems like a lot of people kind of set up these retro channel or these Discord channels. It's almost like a Slack channel, which is like a persistent chat room, where people hang out. I don't know. A couple people suggested this. I don't want to commit any of us to moderating anything because we're not going to do it, and none of us are going to promise to be in there at a regular interval. I
have no hours left to do that.
Yeah, but if there are people that really want me to, just, I guess, comment in the video, and if enough people say they want something like that, I can set that up and leave people to their devices, but I doubt we'll be super active in it. All right, let's see. Is running burnt CDR DVDRs bad for your console, or is this just a myth?
It depends on the media and the chemistry of the dye that you're using. If you use a nice verbatim azo silver, preferably the Data Life Plus chemistry, or if you use a real Tiouden media, the wear and tear on your laser will be negligible to that of a pressed disc, providing that your burner is of good quality. If, however, you're using cheap generic media and you're coupling that with a subpar burning apparatus, yes, that will exhaust the focus and tracking coils of your laser assembly.
It's got to work harder to do stuff. Is that what the thing is? And it increases wear and tear on the.
Correct. That is correct, Steve.
Okay.
So I have to ask the question then: Is there a list floating somewhere of proper media? Can you still buy the media that can do it? Because a lot of CDR manufacturers don't even exist anymore. And what about the burners?
I made a list about 8 years ago. It's probably still floating on the internet in a bunch of different forums. But I'll tell you what to do. If you're really interested in getting high quality media, what you need to do is you need to get on the Musician's Friend. Musician's Friend have blank, nameless DVDRs and CDRs that are from the Tiouden plant. And they're some of the best of the best. But if you're really interested in wanting a nice hierarchy from best to worst, I can compile that and provide that to the chat peoples.
Yeah, definitely. Because I have a lot of I own Sonic CD, but I actually like Sonic CD Plus better. It's the enhanced version. So what I would like to do, I got 100 cheap garbage CDRs for $1 the other day at a junk store. I'd love to burn the copy that I downloaded on one of those. Test it just to make sure that the download works, and then burn that onto a really high quality CD that I keep forever. So yeah.
I remember back in the day when I was buying Fuji films, they had two kinds. There was a made in Taiwan and a made in Japan. I think the made in Japan was the Tiouden based version, and that's what I used to put all of my Dreamcast backups on.
There are two components. Actually, there are three components that will determine the ultimate outcome of the quality of your burn. The first is the burner. Now, I used to use these good old-fashioned external Plexter drives that were phenomenal. They had very little wobble. Their SNR was fantastic in terms of what's transferred to the disk. But your burner's one. The second is the dye and chemistry used in the dye. That's very integral. The third most pivotal thing, or the third very important thing, is the reflective material on the base of the disc. So.
And the burn speed too, right?
Well, part of the drive. That's. Okay. I lump that into the drive thing, but basically, those are the three things that make up a good burn or a shitty burn. Now, I could explain the science of that, but that's beyond the scope of our Q&A thing. So just take it at that, and I'll provide a list of best to worst media brands and sort of combinations of drives and media. So sorry, I didn't mean to go on about that.
No
worries. I love that. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Bob.
All right, we'll do one more question and then push the rest over to next time. This is a follow-up from Dave Kirscher, who we answered one of his questions last time, but I guess didn't fully answer it. He was really curious as to if there's any difference, all things being equal, between attenuating in the console or on the SCART head with respect to noise on the other lines.
I think this was in reference to C-Sync. in particular, and I guess you can make the case that so if you're putting your series resistor all the way in the console side, on the outside of the console, it's a lower voltage as it's traveling across the medium. So lower voltage means less electric field, so means less coupling. But what kind of coupling are you going to get? C-Sync only pulses down during video when no video is there. So C-Sync has no effect on video. The only effect would be on audio. So maybe you could get a little more audio hum if you do it and all the way to the SCART head versus the console head. But in terms of video, I don't think you're going to get problems. I don't know. Anyone else have an idea?
That sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah, I think that's sensible enough.
So you're talking about attenuating the sync, right? But if you're talking about putting series resistance in the RGB lines, the specific video encoders, such as like the Sony chips found in the Sega consoles, the datasheet specifically calls for those resistors being as close as possible.
Yep.
To the to the video encoder, right? So they should be in the console head.
Right. For consoles like Genesis, where they have them on the board, right? Where they should be. They should be as close to that pin as possible because you have a feedback node, because they're feedback amplifiers on these chip outputs, and you want to keep that node as short as possible to have less parasitic capacitance on that node, which causes oscillations and problems.
What about in cases where two resistors are used? So one like 75 ohm resistor in the console side, and then another resistor on the board in the SCART head to drop it to whatever exactly it needs to be.
You're talking about source terminating, right?
Yeah, so let's just say, because I've seen this before and I don't understand why, and it's probably over my head, but let's just say in a SCART cable you need 200 ohms of resistance on one line, and it's recommended that it's on the console side. So what happens if you put a 100 ohm resistor on the console side and a 100 ohm resistor in the SCART head? Isn't that the same thing? Because you're adding 100 and 100 is 200. And if you're starting out with resistance on the console side, doesn't that do it good enough in order to make it right? Or is that just adding weirdness?
I think 100 is enough to isolate the sensitive node. But then you still have that whole length of cable where you could get RG&B would mix, right? Is this on the RG&B lines, you're saying, Bob?
I think the only time I've seen that was on the C-Sync line.
It's on the C-Sync line, then C-Sync line is usually not driven through. I don't think it matters. We're getting into the weeds on this.
Gotcha. Okay.
Where I don't think it's relevant.
It isn't. It isn't relevant, Steve.
Alrighty, let's wrap it up there and save some of the other questions for next time. I think last time we were a bit more question focused. This time we were more topic focused, and maybe next time we'll go back to try to answer more questions.
Next time is Halloween. Come on, man.
Yeah, really.
Are we doing it on Halloween next time? I don't think so.
We'll
be close.
It'll be close, yeah. I'm going to dress up.
Can I dress up as Zach?
Well, don't we usually... Oh, you bastard. You sexy man.
I have no idea what I'm going for as Halloween.
I'm going as Richard Simmons, actually.
The robotic Richard Simmons?
No, just the regular one. I've got my outfit ready for the Halloween parties.
Oh my god.
Maybe I'll go with Susan Powder instead then, and we'll just blow everybody's mind from the 90s, and everybody too old won't understand.
All right,
Stop the insanity, Zach.
We'll shoot for the week of the 23rd, I guess, 2 weeks from now. We'll do more questions that time. So if you have questions in addition to the ones that we didn't get to this time, as always, leave them in the comments below the video, and we'll add them to the list, and we'll definitely get to them all next time.
I don't know if I mentioned, but this Pib Zero by Coca-Cola Company was fantastic.
Yeah,
I
Pit
ran out
Zero's
of good
pretty
beer, so I
solid.
switched to Zach's favorite, Bush.
Bob, if you're really hurting that bad, you can ask us for money.
Yeah, Bob. Yeah, seriously, Bob.
And I'll also add, I don't know if I mentioned, but the OSSC was, perfectly matched with this box of tampons. So.
I love it.
I love that. I love that so much.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed the stream, please like and subscribe, and make sure to hit that little bell so you get the notification next time. So you're reminded that it's that time to waste 2 hours of your life again. So
Be sure to do that. Be sure to do that to my channel too.
no, don't do that to Voultar's channel. He has enough subscribers. Enough already.
Yeah, when you get done, just go ahead and go to Bob, Retro RGB, and Voultar, and DB Electronics, and just
They
forget
have
about the
more
shit.
than enough.
Nick,
Only
maybe we
subscribe
just
to
need
this.
maybe we just need worse copies.
Guys,